The genre of card games as a service is undergoing yet another major transformation. Bold new leaders are rewriting the established rules of the industry, and these shifts are not in the player's favor. The old kings of the genre are facing dramatic crises and slowly slipping into the abyss of obscurity. As veteran Hearthstone players, Math Guys and I want to take a closer look at the current state of live service card games and talk about the key new trends that will define the future.
Time to rock and roll!
Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician and this is Holomancer.
Also, Chief Investigative Reporter Dora joined us this evening.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
Over 11 years ago, Blizzard reinvented the genre of digital collectible card games.
The enormous popularity and financial success of Hearthstone proved beyond doubt that card games could appeal to a truly broad audience, sparking a new wave of growth for the entire genre. When you're that successful, you start defining the rules for the rest of the market, and fans of digital card games were very fortunate that, at the time, it was Blizzard setting those rules.
Hearthstone set a high industry standard for competitive play. Its crafting system and flexible progression model allowed players to access the most efficient strategies, even with limited free resources. In practice, the game sold players variety rather than raw power for money, which was revolutionary, especially on mobile platforms. For creators of new games, it was impossible to ignore this benchmark, since every new release was inevitably compared to Hearthstone.
The influence of online games has never been measured by audience size alone, but rather by financial performance. As a rule, live service games lose revenue year after year, and the main long-term challenge for management is not to earn more, but to slow the rate of decline and thus extend the project's lifespan.
The gradual loss of Hearthstone's dominance, combined with global shifts across the entire gaming industry, created room for bold new projects. Ones that no longer followed the established trends but instead started shaping their own rules. Today, the market is crowded with high-quality card games locked in fierce competition for both revenue and audience attention. On top of that, player expectations have skyrocketed, forcing developers to invest more effort and spend significantly more just to sustain their games.
Today, we want to take a closer look at how the 10 most notable card games in the genre are doing by comparing their revenues. Unfortunately, official earnings data isn't available, but since almost all of these games are present on the mobile market, we can get a rough picture of global financial trends and cross-check it with Steam statistics.
Dear viewers, as always we've put a huge amount of work into gathering data, and now we're ready to share our subjective analysis with you.
We'd greatly appreciate it if you could drop us a like in advance and subscribe to the channel. That's the best reward for our efforts.
So, let's begin with 10th place. A game that, financially speaking, has been dead for a long time, yet somehow continues to receive monthly updates against all odds. Legends of Runeterra by Riot Games is a true anomaly. Since its release in 2020, the game positioned itself as a service with a very player-friendly economy, a direct echo of Hearthstone's influence. Financially, it was indeed more generous, but the crucial mistake was that its primary focus was monetization through cosmetics.
The fate of this game is a sobering reminder. Live service card games with overly generous economies and a heavy reliance on cosmetic items are extremely difficult to monetize, even when they boast a large audience, stunning design and unique gameplay. In turn, low revenue makes it impossible to provide full long-term support.
According to App Magic, 2024 was a relatively successful year for the game. It even managed to break into the top 1,000 highest-grossing mobile apps. In 2025, however, the situation worsened, and the game is now struggling to remain within the top 2,000. The weak revenue stream has left its mark. The game now releases content primarily for its PvE mode. Sensor Tower reports that in the first 9 months of 2025, the game generated about $3 million in revenue and was installed on over 400,000 new devices. These numbers match App Magic's data, but let me remind you, this is unofficial information. We've been tracking financial results across multiple games for years, and we've learned that the numbers are never perfectly representative. Still, even approximate figures are good enough to compare projects against one another. Unfortunately, we have no data on Legends of Runeterra's financial performance on PC. But personally, I doubt the situation is significantly different on other platforms. For multi-platform games, mobile often becomes the primary revenue source, or at least matches PC earnings. A revenue of $3 million across 9 months might have been enough for the game to survive back in 2014, when releasing new content once every 4 months was sufficient, and it sold well without mountains of extra cosmetics. Today, however, industry standards are entirely different. Developers are expected to release new content monthly while offering a vast catalog of items for players to purchase. Producing content at this pace and volume is extremely expensive, requiring large development teams and significant technical staff for cross-platform support. Add to that the costs of advertising and marketing, critical for live service games, and it becomes clear that continuing to support Runeterra, even in its trimmed-down form, is almost an act of charity. And for that, I have enormous respect for Riot Games.
For comparison, let's look at a title you've probably never even heard of, Duel Masters Plays. It was created as an alternative to Yu-Gi-Oh! With a simplified turn system aimed at a younger audience. The two games share a lot, from visual style to gameplay. Despite being available only in Japan, the game earned over $16 million in 2025 alone and saw more than 150,000 new installs. From these results, it's clear that uniqueness and high-end design are not always the key factors behind a project's success. In 8th place, we find a debut title born in hardship. The Bazaar is the long-awaited passion project of former professional Hearthstone player Runeterra.
This is a card-based auto-battler with a distinct identity, and plenty of interesting features. Development stretched over many years and was partially funded through crowdfunding. The Bazaar was initially positioned as a game with no gameplay restrictions, and monetization purely through cosmetics.
But once testing finally began, it became clear that reality didn't match the promises. New content was locked behind a paid battle pass. Naturally, this sparked outrage, but in response, players received one of the worst examples of community communication. Runeterra insisted this wasn't deceitful and behaved inappropriately toward his audience. A classic case of shooting yourself in the foot. After the official release, the shot came to the other foot. The game not only launched as a paid product, but it also required players to purchase additional new content separately. That's sheer nonsense in a market where all major live service card games are free to play. The game is unavailable on mobile platforms, but its release on Steam allows us to gauge its popularity. According to SteamDB, at launch nearly 8,000 players were online simultaneously. Over time, daily activity declined, and it now hovers around 2,500 players. This places the game 348th on Steam by active players and 745th in sales. Of course, this isn't the full picture. Most of the core audience presumably accesses the game through the TempoStorm launcher. The Steam release simply gave the game a financial boost, which unfortunately didn't lead to renewed growth. And that's a real tragedy because the Bazaar is a polished, high-quality game with a unique design and a fresh take on the auto-battler genre. The sad truth is that it never found the right monetization model, and for live service games, that often matters even more than the gameplay itself.
Starting a developer career by betraying your most loyal audience is awful. But looking at the bigger picture, I tend to side with Runeterra. We've said it many times before. The nature of card games and their audiences simply doesn't allow cosmetics-driven monetization to be effective enough. This is especially true for auto-battlers. Despite their huge audience size, these games generate minuscule revenue outside of China. And let's not forget, the game was in development for many years, during which the market shifted dramatically. Even if it was originally designed as a free-to-play title, time inevitably forced changes to that plan.
All that was needed was an honest dialogue with the audience, but that never happened. I sincerely hope the game eventually finds financial stability and leaves its mark on the genre.
Next on our list is a king who has been slowly sliding down from the throne for the past several years. You may not know this, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links began actively competing with Hearthstone back in late 2016. By 2019, it had decisively won that battle and became the top collectible card game on mobile, attracting the most new users and generating the most revenue. The game was essentially a casual version of the original, adapted to vertical screens with fewer field slots and fewer phases, allowing for much faster matches. The audience's hunger for Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay was so intense that even a heavily simplified version created enormous hype. In fact, its reign ended in 2022, when a full version of the game was finally released. From that moment, a steep decline began, and it worsened dramatically this year. The problem lies in the loss of the Japanese market, which had always been its foundation. Revenue has fallen nearly tenfold in just a few years, down to about 15 million, while new installs hover slightly above 1 million. The game is also available on Steam, which clearly reflects the drop in activity that started in 2022 and the steady downward trend over the last year. By revenue, it doesn't even break into the top 1,000 titles on the platform. The acceleration of this decline has a very specific cause, and we'll return to that a little later.
In 6th place is another fallen king, one that tragically lost its pedestal and is now plunging downward. Marvel Snap was unveiled at the end of 2022, and by 2023 it had become the leading card game on the mobile market, even winning a Game Award. Its public face was none other than one of the original fathers of Hearthstone, Ben Brode, who proved he knew card games inside out and set a brand new trend in the industry. Snap stormed into the market, kicking down the door, declaring loudly that it didn't care about the established rules of competitiveness. The core philosophy was the extreme cost of acquiring high-rarity cards that management pitched as a feature. Paradoxically, the very trend toward competitive fairness had originally been championed by Ben Brode himself. Surprisingly, in terms of the progression system, Snap became the ideological opposite of Hearthstone. Its predatory monetization system was balanced by phenomenal game design. Without exaggeration, Snap is a top-class card game, tailor-made for mobile. This forced players into huge compromises. Its financial success shattered the standards set by Hearthstone. Ben Brode demonstrated that competitiveness could be sacrificed, and in doing so, revenue could soar. Throughout 2024, the game showed remarkable stability, always ranked within the top 400 grossing apps. But at the end of the year, it took a heavy hit with the release of Pokémon Pocket. That marked the start of its dark streak. In early 2025, Snap was briefly pulled from the US due to sanctions against its Chinese publisher, Nuverse. Soon after, it separated from Nuverse and began publishing under its own brand, Second Dinner. During this transition, problems arose with bringing in new players. A special release for the Chinese market also proved underwhelming. Rapid financial losses forced management to act aggressively, introducing even more manipulative monetization tactics. Predictably, this sparked massive backlash from the community, including boycott calls, further worsening the game's situation. The game brought in around $23 million, including revenue from the Chinese iOS devices, but that's only half of what it earned in 2024. It also drew about 1.5 million new mobile users.
The trend of declining interest is also evident on Steam, and this is particularly painful, because it perfectly illustrates how a combination of external factors and poor leadership decisions can drastically shorten the lifespan of a game that once stood as a stable market leader. Yet despite the dramatic fall, the monetization trends set by Snap are alive and well in other card games, and that's very bad news for players.
It's time to talk about the current giant of the market. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel launched in 2022 and instantly became the new industry leader. At the same time, it dealt a crushing blow to the casual version, Duel Links, stealing its audience and much of its revenue. While Master Duel didn't achieve overwhelming commercial success, its strength lies in phenomenal stability, and that's the clearest sign the game is here to stay. In 2024, it even managed to grow its revenue on mobile, which is an achievement for a live service already 2 years old. In 2025, it continued performing strongly, with only a dip late in the summer that led to noticeable revenue losses. The cause of that decline is the same as with Duel Links, but unlike its sibling, Master Duel is already showing signs of recovery. In the first 9 months alone, it generated over $35 million in revenue and drew more than 1.5 million new installs. On Steam, the game also shows stability, boasting impressive player activity and, more importantly, frequently edging into the top 100 highest-grossing projects.
And now, we arrive at the game that managed to strike a blow against Yu-Gi-Oh! Shadowverse was designed as a Japanese alternative to Hearthstone. Released in 2016, it quickly carved out a visible space in the live service card game market, though it never led the pack. It was a long-lived game that, over 7 years, gradually lost financial efficiency. Management saw no other choice but to release a sequel. The announcement, combined with the end of new content in December, predictably spelled the financial death of the original game. By mid-2025, the long-awaited sequel had arrived, making waves in Japan and siphoning money away from other regional leaders. At its peak, it reached the global top 20 grossing mobile apps. In its first 4 months, it generated more than $50 million, spent by about 2 million players on mobile platforms. This already surpassed the performance of its predecessor. Naturally, the cycle of collecting had to start all over again, since players couldn't carry their cards forward. On top of that, the in-game economy became noticeably harsher, including new restrictions on crafting. This was a direct consequence of the trend toward reduced competitiveness, a trend started by Marvel Snap a few years earlier.
But in this case, management clearly overreached. Either they overpriced the game, or it simply wasn't engaging enough to justify such a steep cost. Revenues dropped far too sharply after launch, and it's still uncertain whether the game will ever find the long-term financial stability it needs. Steam statistics only add to the picture. User activity is plummeting, the rating is abysmal, and players complain endlessly about its predatory monetization. For now, it remains among the leaders thanks to its explosive start, but its position is extremely fragile.
We are almost at the end of this video, and it's time to discuss the 3 main favorites of the industry. In third place, we've put the game that has managed to stay at the top of the card game world for over 11 years. Looking at the dramatic collapses of other popular titles over short spans of time, it becomes clear that Hearthstone's leadership isn't doing as bad a job as we sometimes think. The game has ultimately outlasted countless competitors that tried to dethrone it. Today, Hearthstone boasts one of the largest player bases, combining both traditional Hearthstone and the auto-battler battlegrounds. After years of industry transformations, the game has become the most generous and player-friendly on the market, standing in direct opposition to the latest industry trends. Consider this. Just a few years ago, regular players could collect every useful card for competitive play completely free, simply by relying on in-game rewards. To complete the entire set, including useless filler cards, one had to spend an additional $80. That price has steadily dropped, and this year the total cost of acquiring all new cards fell to just $35. What's more, the downward trend is continuing. The latest expansion turned out to be the most generous in the game's history, with the effective cost of a full collection dropping close to zero. What other game is willing to offer so much for so little time and effort? And this doesn't even mention the fact that Battlegrounds remains entirely free to play. Beyond that, the game's economy hasn't just preserved its flexibility, it has expanded it dramatically, allowing resources to multiply. If you haven't played Hearthstone in a long time, now is the perfect moment to test its economy for yourself and judge its generosity compared to other projects. At the end of 2024, the game returned to the Chinese market after a long hiatus. As a gesture of apology, Blizzard gifted players every card from the Mist expansions, including golden versions. This allowed returning players to re-enter the game instantly, adapt to the economy without any investment, and the wave of generosity gave the game a second wind in the region. How's that for competition, Shadowverse? According to Sensor Tower, in 2025 the game attracted just under 1.5 million players, while App Magic data shows more than 2 million new installs. Revenue exceeded $45 million, but half of that came from iOS devices in China, and we see this as a dangerous problem.
From a generosity standpoint, Hearthstone has long been the closest parallel to Legends of Runeterra. While competitors are slowing down player progression, Blizzard stubbornly swims against the current, handing out an overabundance of resources and focusing monetization on cosmetics. In our view, that's a risky strategy. Cosmetics alone are an extremely weak foundation for new growth, and as a result, Blizzard is forced to keep introducing new gimmicks, something that constantly irritates players. Among the latest experiments are cosmetic pets and hero portraits, distributed through gacha mechanics. And let's be honest, gacha is disgusting. We don't like this approach, and players are visibly annoyed. Yet, when you look at it against the broader backdrop of the industry, Blizzard's methods are more vegetarian than predatory. Unfortunately, at this stage, the strategy hasn't shown convincing results in terms of revenue growth, which means the experiments will continue.
As players, we naively believed that everything we had in our favorite game was unshakable, that over time we would only gain more. But gradually, falling revenues cut away many of the unique perks we used to receive for free. This was the direct consequence of overly ambitious changes that ended in failure. We covered this in detail in a separate video about the irreversible loss of Hearthstone's unique identity.
In second place, we've put a game whose financial results are far more modest than Hearthstone's, yet its stability is much stronger, and this year it achieved what almost no other game has managed. Magic: The Gathering made several attempts to enter the mobile market, but its true expansion began relatively recently with the release of Magic: The Gathering Arena in 2021. The game has never had phenomenal results on mobile, but its story perfectly illustrates the saying, slow and steady wins the race. Its revenue may not spike, but its consistency is far more important. Even more impressively, starting in 2025 we've seen clear revenue growth in the mobile market, something that's almost unheard of for live service card games. This is what's truly remarkable. Rarely do games in this genre find new sources of growth. This year I've heard plenty of criticism about Arena. Management has been experimenting with monetization, which many players dislike. Others disapprove of the collaboration with Final Fantasy. And yet, when you look at the data, it becomes clear that the developers are making very smart strategic choices. Even if players don't like the changes, the trade-offs are justified. These innovations directly extend the game's lifespan at a time when other projects are slowly running out of steam. In the first 9 months of the year, Arena earned more than it had during the entirety of 2024 and attracted more players. Look at the Steam charts. For the first time, we see consistent growth. Player activity is still lower than in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, but that doesn't stop Arena from ranking higher in the top sellers chart. This could indicate that the cost of staying competitive in Arena is higher, but crucially, it seems to be in balance with the financial capabilities of its player base.
And finally, we can talk about the new industry leader, which looks more like a dangerous anomaly than a traditional success story. Pokémon Pocket has become the most profitable card game on mobile in the history of the genre. The game fully embraces the trends set by Marvel Snap, but if Ben Brode's creation kicked down the door, Nintendo's title casually blew the entire wall away. The game isn't about competition or player versus player skill, it's about collecting. It feels more like a virtual sticker album with an option for casual battles. Progression is heavily luck-based. Players struggle to calculate the full value of a collection because of the difficulty of obtaining high-rarity cards. There's no crafting system, and trading is limited by several restrictions. And yet, players are willing to accept any compromise, driven by powerful nostalgia and the thrill of experiencing a simplified version of the classic TCG on mobile. Since launch, the game has never dropped out of the top 80 highest-grossing apps worldwide. Its estimated revenue has surpassed $560 million, with over 40 million new device installs in 2025 alone. To put that in perspective, if you divided those numbers evenly, you could sustain 20 fully fledged card game services, each with a solid player base and strong financial foundation.
Fortunately for the rest of the industry, Pokémon Pocket built its massive audience largely on its own. Its influence hasn't acted like a black hole, siphoning players and money away from other projects, at least not yet.
We can't criticize the game for greed, because its approach has translated into incredible revenue stability. From a business perspective, the developers are clearly doing everything right. But at the same time, the game firmly reinforces a worrying trend, reducing players' competitive opportunities in favor of aggressive monetization. And this, in the long run, will almost certainly influence the entire industry.
Which means this: if your favorite card game still values player competitiveness above squeezing money out of resources, then you should cherish and enjoy that while it lasts.
And finally, we can't wait to hear your thoughts. Share with us your own experiences across different card game services.
Which live service card games have you played this year, and what kind of impression did they leave on you?
Let us know your thoughts below and join the polls in your community tab. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to support our content and stay updated.
Traditionally, we want to express our boundless gratitude to our sponsors.
Dear friends, your help is invaluable. We will be grateful for any support.
Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for spending this time with us. We really hope that we will have the opportunity to get in touch in the next video.
Take care of yourself.
And never give up.
Job's done.